Hi there, I'm going to do a review for The Lost World Jurassic Park. This movie came out in 1997 and it's a sequel to Jurassic Park. Directed by the same person, Steven Spielberg, written by largely the same people, David Koepp and Michael Crichton. Although this one's starring a totally different cast. There is Jeff Goldblum as Ian Malcolm, and for a brief moment there is Ariana Richards as Lex Murphy and Joseph Mazzella as Tim Murphy. But for all intents and purposes, whole new cast. Dr. Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler are missing in action in this movie. Instead, we get a whole assortment of other characters. Most notably, Eddie Carr, played by Eddie Carr, who's played by Richard Schiff. Vince Vaughn is in here. John Hammond does make an appearance in this movie, not particularly long. The movie's totally different than the first movie. This movie here picks up where it's been roughly 3 or 4 years since the first movie happened, and therefore the events of Jurassic Park are long since in the past. What we get now is an assortment. You got two different teams being sent in to deal with. What happened is that a girl gets attacked at the start of the movie, and it raises a question about the whole island. And basically, they have to send in. And the other thing is that InGen isn't worried about its stock dividends at this point. Understandable considering the fact it is a corporation that's trying to make money instead of trying to sit on money. The whole concept is that they got to get a team to the island to pull some dinosaurs out of there. And John Hammond has lost control of his company because his nephew apparently, Peter Ludlow, is apparently wanting to lead the charge. He's the new leader of InGen, the new CEO. So his idea is to go down to this island and off the coast of Costa Rica. Like in the first movie, it was Isla Nublar. In this movie, it's a second island that's about what I think it's 100 miles to the northeast or something like that of Nublar. It's called Isla Sorna. More or less, this is based on a novel by Michael Crichton. The novel was very different because that's how Crichton writes it, where Stephen had to keep some levity in the movie. The basic concept is kind of the same. It's like you got a team that's basically sent in to analyze. One team is being sent in to extract dinosaurs. Another team is going to be sent in to compile a photography of the animals and showing that indeed these animals are normal animals. I'm not sure why they needed to prove this case very easily. It should have been obvious that the biggest problem with this movie is that, of course, you're led to have this sort of notion of morality, which is ironic considering the fact that these are not really animals per se. These are not true animals. These are not dinosaurs per se. They are concoctions. They were built in a lab. They were designed in a lab. They had to fill in their gene sequences with like all different animals, particularly frog DNA. But that's where the problem. It's not really too much to be too much of a thinking movie. It's more or less just a matter of getting some sequences involving some heavy duty stuff. Notable sequences are amusing in this movie because, of course, there was one person sent in ahead of the rest of the team. Not sure how she got right passage, but whatever, she did. Julianne Moore plays Sarah Harding, who's supposed to be some sort of wildlife analyst person. It's different in the book. In the book, she's very much set up to be more of a safari woman, a woman that goes out and looks at animals at a distance. In this movie, she's a little bit different than that. It's not entirely clear as to. I think it's largely the same character though. Played by a totally different type of woman though. In the book, I say the book and the movie are very different. I think Stephen had to have some sensation of a real story. The book is kind of drags itself to sleep at times. Basically. Yeah, if they'd gone by what the book material was, John Hammond wouldn't have made it. Plus the fact that they don't really bring up anybody from the first book in the second book. So in this movie, it starts out pretty simple enough, pretty fair enough. It starts out to show the one team coming in by me and their means, and then the second team of course, comes in with helicopters, a big dramatic show in, and a big wildlife chase. But ultimately, some of the cast of characters includes a wildlife, a big game hunter. He's out to capture the T Rex, so he decides to take care of that problem by simply dragging the infant out of its nest and putting it on a pole, putting it on a rope. And that's the whole joke of the movie, is that basically you get a lot of stuff happening. It's not too bad. It's just this movie is not quite as good as Jurassic Park, but it does sort of stand the test of time. Visual effects wise, I think it's a little bit better than the first movie. I think it had to be a bit better. Nonetheless, this movie still has the penchant of um, it spends a little bit too much time on certain things. Basically, the gist is that once the one team finds out the other team from InGen is there, they sabotage their equipment, let the dinosaurs out, and of course this causes a big problem because both teams end up getting caught. Of course, Sarah Harding, Julianne Moore's character, has to bring the infant T Rex to the trailer because it got injured. Roland Temple injured it. And it was so. This is kind of a setup of a bunch of scenes, particularly this scene where they're in the trailer and the adult T Rexes figure out where the infant is, and they come and attack the trailers, and this sets up this whole sequence involving Eddie Carr's character, and more or less, they end up going on a safari trek because both teams have lost their ability to communicate with the mainland. So they have to have some way to get to a communication system, and apparently the center, the lab area that's there, are well, they're there, and they got communication equipment there. Not sure how it's still running, but it's still running. It doesn't really matter. We're talking dinosaurs brought to life here, so not sure how serious you got to take some of this concept. Apparently, in the book and in the movie, it's sort of the idea is that InGen was using some sort of elaborate stuff to build all their equipment because that was the joke, is that this is a state-of-the-art facility, so they use state-of-the-art stuff. Problem is that they kind of run into the same problem they've always run into with these stories, that it's supposed to be some sort of specialty equipment. So not sure exactly what is supposed to be the gist. More or less, they got to get back to the lab. They've run into some problems because, of course, the T-Rex is keeping track of them. And eventually they get to the center of the island, which there was a strict warning against entering the center of the island, because, of course, this is where all the velociraptors are. And indeed, both teams end up meeting up with these raptors. The first team is funny because InGen's team, for some reason, apparently doesn't know about the raptors that well. I don't know. I don't know if any of the guys knew. It's kind of a weird mashup because you would think that the one team would be a little bit more shocked by what they are seeing on this island. Instead, it kind of turns into a weird mishmash of they've seen it before. They all seen it before or something like that. I don't think they have, but I think that's the joke. They already know that there's something on this island. They're just mercenaries for hire. They don't really care, apparently. Even though you think you would care a little bit, given the fact that this is the first time in history dinosaurs have been brought back and alive. But Steven Spielberg does not waste any time on this concept. Instead, he's purely based on the idea that they got to get back to the center of the island to get communication out. And ultimately, they do. But in the process, Roland Tempo, of course, he was coming after the prize of the T-Rex. And he ends up getting a dart into the T-Rex out of an incident. And this T-Rex goes aboard a container ship. Now, God knows why the container ship ends up having a problem with it, but the T-Rex apparently woke up and killed all the crew. At least that's the story. We're not really too sure exactly how this happened. No, it doesn't really matter. It sets up the last bit of the movie, which is sort of like a joke play on Godzilla, I think. They have T-Rex running around San Diego, and of course they have to lure it back to the docks. Another thing that's kind of confusing about this movie is the timeline jumps, particularly at the end. They go from Isla Sorna to going back up to San Diego. And they make it seem like it was just a one moment jump, even though anybody who knows anything about these areas is that Isla Sorna is not close to San Diego. San Diego's up in the United States, Isla Sorna is off the coast of Costa Rica. So in other words, you had to make a plane flight to get all the way back. There's a huge time jump. It's a very confusing time jump, but nonetheless, it's a movie about dinosaurs. They have to take them back to the mainland to set up a theme park. This time they're going to do a theme park in San Diego's boundaries so that they can contain the animals a bit better. It's not too bad. It's just I know I understand InGen's reasons for doing this because of course these are their animals and they have to bring them back. I'm not sure how they survived for so long being in Chapter 11 because generally speaking you're not supposed to keep your stockholders on waiting terms. In the book they handle it totally differently. Is that this is an abandoned island and InGen itself went bankrupt, so there's no InGen. There's nobody to leave a trail behind. There's nobody to talk about it. But in this movie, there's somebody there to talk about it. And of course, this is the second island. This is Site B, which gets a little confusing in the later films that are going to be coming out. Jurassic World franchise completely eschews all this narrative for some reason and runs it into the banks and says there's more than one island. Well, we already knew there was more than one island. There is Isla Sorna. Everybody forgets about the Lost World in Jurassic Park 3. But nonetheless, pretty good movie, worth the watch. If you like dinosaurs, it's worth the watch. Again, not terribly many dinosaurs in this movie, but there is a few elaborate sequences involving chase sequences and stuff like that. So it's worth a watch. Yeah, it's all good.